Powerlessness is terrifying. The inability to affect the world around you, to control yourself, to control anything at all is a terrifying proposition. It's basically where the genre of horror literature and film comes from. It is where the subgenre of science fiction movies, the alien invasion, comes from, which is itself an echo of colonialism, where we just sort of inverted the question and asked, what if there was some more powerful civilization invading us as opposed to the other way around? And this fear of being helpless is pervasive, I think, through all of human nature. But there is another fear, something more cosmic, if you will, that is going on with the poem that we are going to be discussing today. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I am Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion, one which will appear in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one being the poetry discussion playlist, now over 750 videos strong, and number two being the Emily Dickinson playlist, a playlist of videos dedicated exclusively to the greatest poet of all time, of course, Emily Dickinson, now approaching 250 videos strong. But the poem in question today, I felt a funeral in my brain, and it reads as such. I felt a funeral in my brain, and mourners to and fro kept treading, till it seemed that sense was breaking through. And when they all were seated, a service, like a drum, kept beating till I thought my mind was going numb. And then I heard them lift a box and creak across my soul, with those same boots of lead again. Then space began to toll, as all the heavens were a bell, and being but an ear, and I, and silence, some strange race, wrecked, solitary, here. And then a plank in reason broke, and I dropped down, and hit a world at every plunge, and finished knowing then. I think that we are lulled to sleep by this poem in an ironic fashion. I felt a funeral in my brain. This line is itself kind of ambiguous. I felt a funeral in my brain. Did you feel a funeral, or was the funeral itself in your brain? Did you feel it in your brain, or was the funeral in your brain? And mourners to and fro kept treading till it seemed that sense was breaking through. Our speaker is without senses. We don't really have a sense of touch in this poem. We have no sense of sight in this poem. Everything is heard. Now, the I felt a funeral in my brain, you could interpret that as touch. But is that really what it is? Is this literal feeling, or is this emotional feeling? I felt the funeral in my brain. One aspect, so I've done videos on this poem several times. I don't think I have ever attacked it from this place. I felt a funeral in my brain. When we refer to our feelings, they are things which may or may not be real. They are manifest in our reality, but that does not mean that they are true in the strictest sense. You feel anger, but you can feel anger at perceived slights. You don't have to be feeling anger at anything that has actually happened. The entire feeling of being paranoid is based on nothingness. The feeling in this poem, I've never really explored it in this way. To feel the funeral in your brain, is this an exploration of depression, an exploration of being depressed and having your entire life, your family, your loved ones, your friends, writing you off because you have changed. With that framing in mind, let's read it one more time. The funeral, not a literal funeral, the funeral being depression. Being buried as a retreat into the self, an exclusion from society, not a literal burial. The funeral goers leaving the body, interpret those as the people in your life leaving you, abandoning you because you have changed in this way, to where you are, in their eyes, just some type of corporeal form, not a person, not really a being. We get this here, being but an ear. This statement of being but an ear, because our speaker just hears. So let's read this one more time with that in mind. The funeral as depression, going away. The mourners, those loved ones who will not see you for some time because you are different. I felt a funeral in my brain, and mourners to and fro kept treading till it seemed that sense was breaking through. And when they all were seated, a service, like a drum, kept beating till I thought my mind was going numb. And then I heard them lift a box and creak across my soul with those same boots of lead again. Then space began to toll, as all the heavens were a bell, and being but an ear, and I, and silence, some strange race, wrecked, solitary, here. And then a plank in reason broke, and I dropped down, and hit a world at every plunge, and finished knowing then. In this way, our speaker is likening death to depression. And certainly, I'm sure that it, for many people, at many times, feels that way. It feels as if there's this great dichotomy between yourself and the rest of the world. But something that is equally as terrifying as that here is the sense of helplessness. The sense that there is nothing to be done once this has occurred, once this thing has changed. Once this creaking in your soul becomes too much to bear, it is just that you submit. And at some point, everyone else will write you off. And there's something else here worth exploring. It's a word called Apeirophobia, the fear of infinity or the eternal. I think that sometimes these changes, these feelings, these depressions, they not only feel like the end of the world, they feel as permanent as the end of the world. There is this question whether or not you will ever recover from what it is through which you are going. Or is this it? Is this the end of it? Whatever it may be. So, our speaker here is being placed in the ground, being buried, but is still conscious. That feeling of isolation which will end you know not when, is perhaps the ultimate existential dread. When I was a kid, so one of my first memories is, I believe by the setting in my mind's eye, if this is true, if this is accurate, I must have been like 4 years old, right? That's right when you're becoming conscious, really, when you were first being awoken to the world. This idea of eternity made me absolutely lose it. One of my very first memories is me bawling my eyes out because this idea of eternity, of always being, of having no choice in the fact that you were born and now you always will be, assuming you believe in an afterlife. That was terrifying. You couldn't stop it. There was no end. You always would be. I think we've been, in culture, we have really sort of used things like stories of religion to get used to that idea. Perhaps we can talk ourselves into believing that being around forever is okay. But there not being a forever is more scary, is more terrifying. I'm not sure that's the case. But when I was a kid, there was a show, Tales from the Crypt. And one of the most terrifying one I remember was it was kind of like a noir in the setting and the narrator and all this stuff. It was like a noir story. And you were looking through the point of view, looking through the eyes of a character, and you had his voiceover just running during this story, and he's kind of the passenger, like in a car, but it's in the story. And then you realize about halfway through, he's dead. And his consciousness is just stuck in his body. And that's a scary thing. The speaker in this poem, so if your conceptualization of the ever after is that your consciousness stays with your body, the ever after is really going to be terrible. Especially if you can feel the things your body feels. Our speaker in this poem is that way. Our speaker in this poem is kept with the body, and not only kept with the body, but blind with the body. Now, this could be because the speaker is confined in the coffin, right? So does not have the sense of sight for that reason. But our speaker seemingly finds themselves conscious at this funeral. The speaker doesn't say how they got there. The speaker doesn't really acknowledge that this is their own funeral. Just finds herself there. And then we get this final stanza. And then a plank in reason broke, and I dropped down and hit a world at every plunged, and finished knowing then. This is, in my opinion, our speaker saying that this depression, which they have cast as death, is really a break in everything that makes sense. And then a plank in reason broke, and I dropped down and down. As my entire worldview, as everything that I think I know stops making sense in the clutch of this disease. I drop down and down. I sink further and further and hit a world at every plunge and find a new place every time I sink lower, and finished knowing then. Once reason breaks, there is no knowing anymore. There is nothing there to know. Our speaker, in my opinion, is casting a vision of the ever after that is truly worth a phobia. Powerless in her getting there, powerless to leave. In my opinion, this is the most terrifying Emily Dickinson poem. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about here. There is poetry every Monday, and as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.